False alarm. Now we're starting. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Assembly Call Radio, where each week we discuss the most important IU basketball stories from the past 7 days. This is our 75th edition of Assembly Call Radio, and it is our 403rd episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the evening of Thursday, May 10th, 2018. I am your host, Jared Morris. And let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment.
And Indiana is the national champion.
When it comes down, Indiana will be champion.
Smart takes the shot.
The Hoosiers have won the national championship.
On Tuesday morning, our friend Alex Bozich posted his first 2019 recruiting big board over at Inside the Hall. And while Alex doesn't explicitly state this on his post, these types of recruiting boards are usually listed in order of some combination of what level of priority a player is for IU and how high the mutual interest is surmised to be. And as you start going down the board from the top, Trace Jackson Davis, 5-star. Keon Brooks, 5-star. Trendon Watford, 5-star. DJ Carton, high 4-star, probably soon to be 5-star. Matt Hurt, Romeo level 5-star, meaning he's a top 5 player in the class. And it goes on from there with a bevy of talented 4-star guards coming next. And by the way, if this sounds familiar to you, it should, because I outlined this very same point in a recent episode. But now, in the wake of Romeo Langford's commitment, I want to underline it and bold it and italicize it, because with Romeo giving IU and Archie his stamp of approval, none of these 5-star targets really seem all that out of reach. In just the second year of Archie Miller's tenure, Indiana is already recruiting like a national power again. The Hoosiers have a top 10 class for 2018 and are in position to do it again in 2019. So I hope that you will accept my apologies for bringing this point up yet again. But my hunch is that it will be a long, long time before you truly get tired of hearing one of us make optimistic and effusive comments on Archie's recruiting momentum. All right, now let me introduce my esteemed co-host for this week's show. To my left, he is one of the world's most respected bracketologists and the president emeritus of the Robert Johnson Fan Club. He is Andy Bottoms. Andy, what is your bottoms line on the last week in IU basketball?
Boy, I don't know how to follow that up. I think we get into these off seasons where, we were joking about this a little bit before we came on about, the off season and the things you got to find to talk about. But I will say a couple of things this week that I enjoyed that kind of at least whet your appetite a little bit for IU basketball and some good stories. And they're both in podcast form. So not to pander to the host, but I thought Jared's conversation on Podcast on the Brink with Angelo Pizzo was really good. Some really good anecdotes and stories from him about, his past and his experience with the program, both as a student and then in the aftermath of Hoosiers, but also hearing some of his thoughts about Archie Miller going forward and the things that he'd seen and what he likes about the program. I think were certainly encouraging and were fun to hear from him. And then the Mind Your Banners conversation between Chronic Hoosier and Jordan Hulls. I think I could have listened to Jordan talk about basketball for far longer than the 45 minutes or so that was there. And just his affinity for the program and for Bloomington and his excitement about the program going forward and what he'd seen from watching from Germany over the course of the season. And then hearing his stats from Germany made me want him on the team that much more than normal. The 50+% 3-point shooting and the fact that he missed all of 2 free throws over the entirety of the season was
could have used that last year.
Yeah, could have certainly used that. It was funny, and he
he was genuinely upset about it.
Yeah, he was really mad about it too. And then he was trying to remember. He then recalled another time where he was asked to miss one on purpose toward the end game situation, and it sounded like it was a really hard thing for him to do. So just I don't know, fun stuff to it's not recruiting, it's not necessarily specific things or game breakdowns, but we talked a lot last week about the excitement for the program and how that has really built and sustained itself even as we move into the middle of May. And I thought those were at least a couple things that can keep everybody excited as we move forward.
And now, to my right, he is the man who is clogging your Twitter timelines with live pitch-by-pitch updates of the San Diego Padres that, frankly, you didn't ask for, but now you can't avoid. He's a columnist for The Big Lead, and he is already game planning how to take maximum credit for all of San Diego native Evan Fitzner's positive contributions next season for Indiana. He is Ryan Phillips.
Saying I'm better than you are. Maybe I am.
I'm just enjoying this. I'm just gonna let it go.
I only know that when I look in the mirror.
All right, we're good. Yeah, I thought. Look,
Hey. The music is not done. I got to cue you, Ryan. What is your rant this week?
I'm not. Look, I'm not.
They say we like the man. You would have really enjoyed that.
No, you know what? I'm not waiting around for you, Morris. We're not here on your timeline. There are people listening. They want their information. It's been a really slow week, but I after the Romeo commitment, it was going to be, I think, and I agree. I think the Fisner transfer was kind of fun just because he actually went to my rival high school in San Diego. I mean, years after me. I'm not going to date myself, but I'm older than he is. And I thought that was an interesting pickup and a good move since I haven't been on to talk about it since it happened. Nice to get a tall shooter. But one thing I do want to bring up is the fact that this past week we got a lot of new entries into the Indiana alumni family. I thought it was great to see all those kids, all the photos on my timeline of people graduating. Our buddy, the coach, Brian Tonsoni's son, graduated. I thought that was great to see pictures like that and see he and the family having fun down in Bloomington. And all the pictures from campus with the graduates always makes me feel good. And slightly older, but it was nice. I thought I always, every year that happens, it's kind of a nice reminder of how special everything associated with Indiana is. And there's now new Indiana graduates out in the world.
Absolutely. All right, here are the topics and questions that we are going to address this week. We will review the incoming recruits not named Romeo Langford. We spent a lot of time talking about Romeo. We're going to talk about the guys not named Romeo. What is their single biggest strength that could earn them early playing time, as well as their single biggest weakness that could keep them off the court as they play their freshman seasons. We'll then discuss our thoughts on which recruit is most likely to be looked back on someday as being undervalued coming in. And we look back on the most undervalued recruits in Indiana history. And there's a very rich history of undervalued recruits coming to Indiana and outperforming low expectations. And then with whatever time we have left, we will answer your questions. All of that coming here on this edition of Assembly Call Radio. Now, before we go any further and get to that stuff, I do want to take a quick minute to talk about our friends at Mecum Auctions. We've been telling you about them, and not that we needed it, but this offseason was a great reminder of just how crazy Hoosiers are about their basketball. And if there is one thing that comes close to the basketball love in Indiana, it's the state's love for auto racing. With the Indy 500 right around the corner and the weather getting nicer, what Mecum has is a great auction event for families who are looking for something fun to do together, because Mecum Auctions is hosting their 31st original spring classic car auction at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, May 15th through May 20th. That's next Tuesday through Sunday. And if you're wondering what you will find at this auction, well, here's what it is. 2,000 classic and collector cars, everything from muscle cars and race cars to classics and exotics. But more than that, it's a family-friendly environment that makes it perfect for a family outing. Oh, and there will be some big-name sports tie-ins as well, with MLB Hall of Famer Reggie Jackson selling 18 cars from his private collection. And Mecum will also be offering the green 1967 Corvette that was gifted to Bart Starr for winning the Super Bowl I MVP award. Gates open daily at 7:30. Tickets and bidder registration is available in advance at Mecum.com. Again, it's Mecum's 31st original spring classic car auction at the Indiana State Fairgrounds, Tuesday, May 15th through Sunday, May 20th. Go to Mecum.com for more information.
Thank you.
All right, you are listening to Assembly Call Radio. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And guys, let's start talking about the recruits. I'm sure everybody saw, this class, the incoming class of 2018. It's a top 10 class, and obviously the biggest reason for that is Romeo Langford, a top 5 recruit, the headliner. But this is a class that we were all very happy with and very excited about even before Romeo signed. And so I want to take this opportunity to go through guy by guy and not give complete scouting reports on them, but let's talk about what they're really good at and maybe what the thing is that they're going to have to work on the most. So I think to do this and make it useful, let's just assume that everybody needs to work on size and strength and, learning the conditioning at the major conference level. That's going to be an issue for all freshmen. So we don't need to talk about those, but let's talk about some of the other attributes. And Ryan, let's go to you first. And let's start with the guy who was rated the highest after Romeo, which is Jerome Hunter. As you look at him, as you watched the tape of Jerome Hunter, what was the biggest thing that stuck out in terms of a strength that could get him on the court early next season? And what's the biggest thing he's going to have to work on?
You know what I loved about Jerome is the fact that he's still new to the game and he can score from anywhere on the floor. I mean, he can shoot threes. I mean, he may not be a dead-eye three-point shooter yet, but he can shoot the three. He can drive and score at the rim, or he can – you see a lot this year, actually, of him with his back to the basket posting up, probably just because he grew and they're trying to take advantage of his length and size. And then he can also hit a mid-range jumper. And you know how I love a mid-range jumper, Jared. I think you're in the same boat. I mean, it's a lost art. But it's
a lost art because it's inefficient.
Yeah, well, it's still fun to watch every once in a while.
Unless you're really good at it, then it's not so inefficient.
Yeah, then it's fine. Yeah, you hit him, it's fine. But so I think that I just like that he has he can score from the full floor. And that's something that's rare these days. A lot of guys are three or rim guys. He makes it happen, from all over the floor. And I think tied in with that is just, and with his scoring ability, is how instinctive he is for his relative newness to the game. I mean, this isn't a guy who's been playing since he was 5 years old, and so I think that all is it sort of ties together for him, and what I think stands out the most when you watch full game film of him.
Yeah, to me, the versatility definitely stands out. But the one
for sure that's tied in there from being able to score everywhere, I think, is his versatility helps that for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing I really like about him, and I learned this after that matchup with Darius Bazley, is his competitiveness. Like, he loved having that mano-a-mano matchup and taking it upon himself to shut him down. Darius Bazley, who was going to go to Syracuse and now is going straight to the G League. I mean, this is a talented player. And Jerome shut him down. I mean, Jerome got the better of him. And I like seeing guys in high school not just beat up on guys that they're bigger than, guys that they're better than, but rise to the challenge against other highly ranked guys. And you could see the interview. I think it might have been Peegs that did the interview with him. And you just saw how excited he was to have that matchup. And I think that competitiveness is going to play well with his coach, Archie Miller, who's obviously known like that. And I think that'll serve him well even early in his tenure.
Hey, you know who else got the better of Darius? Romeo Langford.
Yes. Andy, you want to jump in on Jerome?
Yeah, I think the thing that'll be interesting with him, and I think this is true with a lot of guys around his size, as Ryan mentioned, played with his back to the basket. Even as you look at different recruiting services, they kind of classify him, some as a more of a wing, small forward guy, some as a power forward. It'll be interesting for me to watch where he really kind of settles in from a lineup perspective. We talked a decent amount last week on the show about all the versatility that's going to be there with the roster that Archie has at this point. And so he's a guy that could maybe be a swing guy. Can you really put him in the post if you play small? Or does he really, embrace more of that wing role and be able to, step out and make shots consistently? I think from a competitiveness standpoint, I don't think there's any questions. It really just turns into, where does he settle in to his role on the team, which I think will be interesting to watch. And I think that's true of a lot of guys that size in high school. It's easy to play inside because you're just bigger than everybody.
Yep.
Now that that's not true, where does he really shake out from a roster standpoint?
I think he's a wing. I just think he's a pure wing. I agree with you that I think they played him as opposed to times this year because the teams that were playing didn't have anyone who could check him, at his size and with the length that he has. So I would say that I thought that I think that he's a pure wing. I think he's a guy who will wind up being on the wing, even if he continues to grow, just because he has that skill set. And again, he has that skill set without having played, that much. He's already really far along.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, what do you think is the biggest weakness?
I would say ball handling, and it tied in with that too is just a general aggressiveness, and that goes into boards as well. The ball handling is a skill you can train. I don't think it's a huge problem, but I do think that at times when he gets the ball, he kind of is, and it's not a bad trait, but he's looking where to go with it, and he's not as concentrated on his ball handling, and that kind of ties into a lack of sort of aggressiveness and get up and go when he gets the ball. Now in Archie's offense, you got to get up and go. I mean, he wants to run and move the ball up the court. And so I think that's going to be an issue. And with that aggressiveness factor, I think just attacking the boards on rebounds, I think he gains rebounds because, again, he's tall, he's long. At the next level, he's really going to have to get more aggressive on the boards.
All right, coming up, we are going to continue our breakdown of the biggest strengths and biggest weaknesses for each of Indiana's incoming freshmen, and then we will discuss which of them has the best chance of someday being added to the list of undervalued IU basketball recruits before we talk about who the most undervalued IU basketball recruits of all time are. All of that coming on the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
Well, there's people involved.
All right. That's it for segment one. Hello to everybody watching live. Awesome to have you all here with us. I apologize for Ryan interrupting his intro song. He was not supposed to do that. But it's your intro song, I guess.
Hey, nobody's off limits to be interrupted. The song, other humans, doesn't even matter.
I regret nothing.
It's a great song. I thought you would have loved the last part that you missed there.
It was taking a little long to get to the point.
All right, do you want here? I'm going to play it again so you can hear the words. Now, everybody, so you can hear.
Saying I'm better than you are, but maybe I am. I only know that when I look in the mirror, I like the man.
We like the man.
Yeah, change it next week.
That was one of those. I heard it and it felt right.
I'm surprised that you don't have Hell's Bells as the time for Ryan to talk thing.
Now it works so well as a transition, though.
I know it does. Well, I guess I'm always third, and that was the song of the second greatest closer of all time. So I guess closer.
Yeah, I know.
It works.
I know. All right, let's hop in here to segment two.
Good. I've got all notes on all these guys. So if you need anything from me, just
all right.
If we need to lengthen or shorten or whatever, it's fine.
Well, I'm thinking. Oh yeah, and you want to add Race to this too?
He has to be.
So I mean, yeah, let's try and keep it. I mean, we probably want to try and keep it to like 2.5 minutes on each guy. Maybe we can stretch it to 3.
Yeah, and I don't need to jump in a ton on these, so not a big deal.
All right, just tell me in the chat, Andy, which ones you want to hop in on.
Okay.
But we'll leave the bulk of it to Mr. Phillips here.
Sounds good.
Let me start recording, and we'll get ready for segment 2. All right, here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I am Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. And don't forget, if you ever have to miss all or part of an episode of Assembly Call Radio, there are 2 great ways to catch up. You can subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search for Assembly Call. Or you can join our live Thursday night broadcast or watch the video replays by subscribing to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/assemblycall. So, guys, we started last segment going through the 2018 incoming recruits not named Romeo, talking about their biggest strength and their biggest weakness as they head to campus as freshmen that will determine whether they get on the court or maybe whether they don't get on the court in their first year. So we started with Jerome Hunter, the highest rated of the recruits. Let's go down the list now. I think these ratings are from 24/7 Sports. But Damezi Anderson was the next highest guy, so the third on the list. He's ranked number 92. Ryan, I think we all know his biggest strength, right? Which is shooting. I mean, this guy can get red hot. He's a 3-point shooter for a program that has been starved for them, the last year or two. But I think you actually have a question about how well his shooting is going to translate to the next level.
I've not made that a secret. Look, I think that his biggest attribute isn't necessarily his shooting; it's that his shots go in. And I know that sounds weird, but it's not his shooting form. It's not his ability to 3-point shoot. It's the fact that the balls go in the basket. And That is
He's a
his best.
scorer.
And he's not a pure shooter. If you look at his form and stuff like that, he's not a pure shooter, but he puts points on the board. And some guys just can't do that, So while I do think that there are some issues there that need to get ironed out, and look, all of Damezi's issues are fixable. So I don't want people to think that I'm dogging on the kid when I bring them up. It's just I've heard a lot of people say, well, he's a shooter. IU needs shooters, so he's going to play a lot next year. I'm not sure if that's the case, because I think that there's a lot of work that needs to happen. But that doesn't mean he cannot be. If you're 6'7" like Damezi is, and you can hit shots, you will find your way onto the court in college basketball. I don't know if it'll be as a freshman as much. I mean, I'm sure he'll see time. I don't think he's redshirting. But I think that you will see him eventually get on the court if he works on it and gets better, because you're 6'7" and you can shoot. You'll find your way onto the court in college basketball.
So what are some of the weaknesses then?
I honestly, I couldn't come up with just one without mentioning others. So I've mentioned before that he has sort of a looseness to his game, where there's tight players and there are loose players. And tight players are ones that keep the ball really close to their body, and they swing it through and dribble real tight, real close to their body, keep it within, sort of like a little zone.
Like Yogi. Yogi was
Yogi's a perfect guy for that. Jordan Hulls was like that too. Jordan Hulls never got out of control, and loose players are out of control constantly. So I just think that, and it's guys when they hold the ball, they'll hold it a little too low, and it's easy for defenders to snap it away, and, things like that. And also when they shoot, they don't always have the same motion every time. They don't have real quick, short movements to get into their shot and all that stuff. Damezi is a really sort of lanky guy, and he sort of just has really long movements and things like that. So he's what I call a loose player, and I think he just needs to work on technique and fundamentals. And it's things like, squaring your feet before you shoot instead of just having them however and just going up with your release. I think snapping his release off, snapping his wrist, something he doesn't do consistently. And when he does it, he makes the shot. There's video evidence to be like, hey, dude, when you do it like this, you make your shots. When you don't, you miss. So let's work on that. But I also think that Damezi's so good, has had such a great high school career that it's all come very easy to him. And he's going to have to work really hard in college to make up for, the fact that he hasn't faced the competition he's going to face at the next level, which a lot of guys do. And you mentioned that off the top. But I think with him, everything has come so easily. And we saw it with James Blackman Jr. as well. His freshman year, he couldn't score at the rim, because he'd always been able to do it so easily in high school and never stepped up his game. He got better as he went along, but I think Damezi's going to face some of the same trouble. And with that sort of technique, and I think a consistent effort in things like rebounding and all that stuff will need to be addressed. But again, a guy who it comes easy to in high school, you can't really be mad at for not developing those things, because he was winning and he was, scoring a lot of points and doing a lot of, great things on the court. So it's just going to be, I think the step up in competition is going to be a lot for him.
So that's Damezi. And depending on what recruiting service you look at, some have Damezi rated higher than Robert Phinisee. Others have Robert Phinisee rated higher. But Robert Phinisee is the next guy on the list. And he's a guy that a lot of IU fans are excited about, for a program that has been starved of true point guard play for 2 years now, since having one of the best point guards in school history. Having a guy with Robert's profile is really exciting. And he's a guy that a lot of people are expecting to play pretty significant minutes as a freshman. To me, Ryan, when I look at Robert, having, seen him play, not in person, but seen him play on tape, having talked to him, seeing interviews with him, I think his consistency level as a player and a person, and his basketball IQ are the biggest strength that can get him on the court early. Because that, to me, he has those in rare quantities for a freshman, and combined with some of his skills, I think those are going to really help him. What do you see as the biggest strength that can get him on the court as a freshman for Indiana?
I see a couple things that are really close together for me as like a top thing. One is he has an incredible basketball IQ. He's really smart. He's very quick, and it's deceptively quick. He does this hesitation dribble that just nobody can guard. It's guys jump at him and he just goes right by them. And the last thing is he plays bigger than his size. He's only 5'11", but as you see him when he attacks and when he rebounds, he just plays like a bigger guy. He's not that big, and maybe that goes away when he moves against even bigger guards, because I know he's struggled against guys with size a few times when he's been on the on the AAU circuit and things like that. But I think that he's a guy who plays bigger than his size, and I think that he makes the fact that he's 5'11" actually work for him because he can kind of sneak in between guys when they're not sort of expecting him to. So those are the things I like about him. I agree with you. I think that the consistency is so great with him, and I like how he's consistently gotten better every single year. That's huge for me because guys who consistently get better every year and don't have just one huge jump in their play, but guys who are consistently challenging themselves and getting better usually continue that at the next level.
Well, and I think what's interesting about him is people have talked about this over the course of his high school career, kind of played different roles. In his senior year, had to take on a little bit more of a scoring role. So
Yeah.
I think when you put a guy like that into a situation where you wouldn't expect him to need to do that, he's easily able to kind of mold himself into what's needed at the time. And we lamented on many a post game show last year the lack of a true point guard, and he fits that mold. Whether he fits that mold this year at the beginning by the end of the season or into his sophomore year remains to be seen. But I think that's the upside is a guy who really plays under control at the point guard spot, gets guys the ball where they want it, and can score when you need him to, but is most focused on getting other guys involved first. I think is a big deal. I think that comes for him. It's just a matter of when.
So let's talk about Robert's biggest weakness. It's weird. I mean, obviously, I think his biggest weakness is kind of the size strength thing, and we said we're not going to mention that. I'll tell you the weakness that I think could give him some trouble as a freshman, and it's his outside shot. Like, he's a good 3-point shooter, but you look at his percentages from the high school line, they don't blow you away. Now, the nice thing is he got better every year. 33% as a sophomore, 34% as a junior, 36% this year as a senior. So you like that, but now going to obviously a further out line, going to bigger defenders, quicker defenders, is he going to be able to shoot a high enough percentage from 3 to keep people honest so that he can then still penetrate and get inside the lane like he's going to need to? So it's not a glaring weakness. Like, it's not like the guy is going to go out there and shoot 20%, but can he become a 39, 40, 41% 3-point shooter? Because if he can, that really takes him to the next level. If he's down in the low 30s, now he's in, not even Josh Newkirk territory. So I think, to me, that's going to be the big thing that could help determine how much he plays as a freshman.
Yeah, right here, shooting consistency. You can see it written down on the paper. I mean, that's what it is. His shot looks better. I remember watching film on him last summer and thinking, yeah, it's going to be an issue he needs to work on. I thought his senior year, it looked better, but I think he shot more this year. And so his percentage wasn't going to make a huge jump because, as Andy said, he needed to take on more of a scoring load. And plus, when you're a senior and you're playing every minute of the game, your legs aren't necessarily going to always be there. So I think that is the big issue for him. I think his shot looks much better, and I think that he'll be fine. And again, the consistency of getting better, because I think he's gotten better every year. That's something you can look at and feel confident in. That this is a guy who knows he needs to continue to work on his game, which I appreciate. I know Indiana fans will appreciate that too.
Yep. You're listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. We were talking about the biggest strengths and the biggest weakness of each of Indiana's incoming 2018 recruits, not named Romeo Langford. Let's talk next about Jake Forrester. 24/7 has him rated as the 131st prospect. And when you look at his biggest strength, he's an athletic guy, he's a bouncy guy, an energy guy. I actually think that the biggest strength that could help him play early on is he's a guy who understands his role. Like, he really seems to know who he is. He doesn't have to be the star. He's played with other great players before. He's played on teams stacked with talent. He doesn't try to do too much. He knows who he is and what he does. And I think that's not something that all freshmen come in with because they're used to being the star. And I think he'll have a humility as a freshman that maybe isn't common. And so I think that will help him accept the role and maybe be able to get on the court in a supporting role earlier on if some of the other skills come along. So that, to me, is the biggest strength. Ryan, what do you have for Jake?
Well, for me, it's the fact that he's 6'8", but he plays much bigger because of his athleticism. And his athleticism is his best trait, I think. He's a guy who, offensively, you don't really see him do much other than catch lobs and dunk, or finish at the rim. I mean, that's pretty much all he does. And those things can get better and improve. But given Indiana's dearth along the front line and the unknown status of a guy like Deron Davis, that can get you on the court with this Indiana team, as a depth player. What I would say is he's what we call a run and jump big man who's just he runs the floor, and on defense he will jump up and down on offense. He will jump up and down, get the ball, dunk it, whatever. That's what those guys are. A guy like Deron Davis is not a run and jump big man, for example. He's pretty much the opposite of what I would call a run and jump big man. So there are uses for both kinds of guys, and what you would ideally get is a guy who can do sort of everything. And Thomas Bryant sort of turned into that, where he would run the floor. He could, use his length and athleticism on both ends of the court, but he also could post up, have solid post moves, then step out and hit a shot. I mean, so there was balance there. That's what you're aiming for with a guy like Jake. He's a guy who I think knows he needs to get better. Every interview you read is him talking about developing his skills. And you're right, Jared. He's played on teams where he has not been the featured guy. And there's a benefit to that. There really is. A guy like Victor Oladipo was like that in high school for years. He was at DeMatha, which is a great high school. He knew he had to consistently get better just to even get on his high school floor. So with Jake, I think there's a possibility that he's going to come in ready to work and ready to improve. And hopefully that pays off down the line.
Biggest weakness for him, shooting, you think?
I think that's part of it, but I think in general, what I had written down is that he's raw. And I think that shooting goes into that. I think that, ball handling goes into that. He's not, even catching the ball in traffic as a big man, you got to be good at that. And you got to be good at one or two dribbles and go up. And he's just not developed there yet. So I think it's just general, rawness. And he's basically a big athlete right now and needs to continue to develop all this basketball skills.
So one other guy that we want to talk about here is Race Thompson, and he's not often mentioned anymore in the class of 2018 because he matriculated to Bloomington last year, but he would be another 4-star player in this recruiting class.
And he was I think he was like top 75 this year, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he's had the benefit of redshirting now. So he's gotten to work with Cliff Marshall. He's gotten to learn the pack line. So every piece of analysis that we're going to give right now is based on a year-old tape and not the player that he currently is. So we don't really know what his strengths and weaknesses are right now because we don't know how much better he's gotten in a year in Bloomington. But as you look at Race, based on what you saw from him as a senior in high school, what do you project as his biggest strengths and weaknesses in his first year playing?
His confidence finishing at the rim. He finishes through contact. He can dunk it hard. I mean, he's an underrated athlete. I remember I gave a scouting report on him when he committed. We did a show where we did a scouting report, and I loved the fact that as a young guy, he was finishing through contact and that he was finishing hard at the rim instead of just, taking a bump and maybe just throwing a wild shot up. He was going through people to finish. And that's so rare for guys that age. And given a year in the system, the strength and conditioning system and a year practicing and a year getting used to just the offense and the flows of college, basically, I expect things out of Race this year. I really do. I think he's going to be a great player for Indiana.
Yeah, I think he's got such a leg up. It's been a long time since we really had a guy redshirt and be able to benefit from that. And I think you see, Villanova's been able to use that pretty effectively. I think we've touched on that.
Gonzaga too.
Yeah, Gonzaga. Those are probably the two most prominent examples. So I think he's a guy that I'm really excited to see play because while the other guys are going through some of those growing pains as they get there, he's kind of got that out of his system and should just be ready to play and has already been able to test himself against a Juwan Morgan in practice and those kinds of things. And that can only be a positive. And you kind of threw out that, we can't say size and strength for everybody because that's kind of a given with him. He's had a chance to address some of those things. And so I think that's really positive. I think he'll be able to step on the floor right away. And from all the things I remember hearing back about, there's some versatility there, the ability to step out and shoot. And I think you see a little bit more of, with Fitzner coming in, that's something they're looking at. And I think with Race, he gives some good versatility as well and be able to settle in, give a lot of good effort, already ahead of the curve, learning the pack line and all those kinds of things that we'll probably talk about. The other guys are, will take some time to pick up. So it'd be interesting to see that. And, as you look at a big class like this and some of the other guys that IU has coming in, it'll be interesting to see how much redshirting really plays a factor in what Archie Miller does going forward and maybe how Race does will be a good test case for that.
Yeah, Jared, do you remember when we were in Bloomington and we were down on the floor and Race walked by and I looked at you and I was just like, dude, he's big.
He's huge.
He looked so much bigger than he did, in high school.
It wasn't quite the same as when we saw OG in person.
No, he was enormous.
Incredible. Yeah. But Race was surprisingly big. I was not prepared for him to be that tall and big.
And I was expecting him to be like kind of a bigger guy, but he looked built and he had shoulders and he was taller than he looks on film and everything. So yeah, they've been doing some good work with him. Clearly.
Yes. Now, based on where these guys were ranked, which one could we end up looking back in the future as being undervalued? We're going to talk about that next.
Are we doing a weakness for Race?
We'll do that next because I already started the music. So we got to get out of this segment. But we'll do that, weakness for Race, and then we will look back at Indiana's storied history of finding diamonds in the rough as well. We'll discuss all of that. Stick with us.
Well, I lived on the outskirts of town.
Yeah, we were already at 17 minutes for that segment.
Oh, geez. Sorry.
So
and I'm just stepping on the music all night tonight.
Hey, it's all good. It is.
I didn't see it. Yeah, I usually note when we're going to break. So.
Oh, yeah, I didn't put that in there. Yeah. So let's do a quick weakness for Race, and then
it'll be really fast.
Yeah, we'll hit this undervalued thing a little bit just because we've teased it, but we could literally probably do an entire episode about it. So maybe we'll do a little bit, and then we'll tease that.
It's gonna be the off season, Jared. We can do a long show on it if you like.
I know. We
maybe why don't we hit, instead of going all time, why don't we hit the undervalued? Could that question you had about the undervalued guy in this class?
Well, we're gonna hit that next,
right? And I'm thinking we might be able to extend that if we pick different guys and give a reason why, and then hold undervalued for next week or something.
Well, I want to hit just a little bit. So maybe what we'll do,
that's fine.
We'll go through, we'll talk about the undervalued guys just from the Crean era, because there were obviously some that stick out, and then we can save the rest of it for another, because we did get some good questions this week too. So then we'll save the rest of it for the next week. I always want to have enough content so we're not, left with 35 minutes looking at each other with nothing to say.
I don't think that'll ever happen to us, Jared. Unless Tom Crean becomes the coach again, I don't think that's ever going to happen to us. And we have to do post games. I don't think that's ever going to happen to us again.
It's Indiana.
Oh, man.
Hey, guys, want to talk about burritos? That's just such a classic line from those days, by the way.
That is. I got to go back and find that one so we can throw it in here at some point. Let me just check the chat real quick. We got a lot of people chatting tonight, which is awesome to see.
And if we ever need a story to tack on, I could tell the story of how my high school beat Fisner's in high school.
Yes, we'll probably do an entire episode about that too.
It'd be great.
Absolutely.
David
I was
asked,
benched for that game.
So David asked, how about Evan Fitzner? We didn't include him in this because we spent, and I should have mentioned that, but we spent last week talking a lot about him.
And it's so hard to find anything on him except for as a high schooler. Like there's nowhere
stuff from St. Mary's.
I haven't found much. I really haven't.
There's some decent stuff. I mean, a lot of it is him making threes and then being pretty good, putting the ball on the floor when people play him. I didn't see a whole lot.
I saw some, but like there was it wasn't like he had a sophomore year highlight package or like any of that stuff, which usually you can find, but nope.
Yeah.
Nothing. He can shoot it though. Everybody says he can shoot it.
He can shoot it. Well, I mean, he's 40% 3 straight years. I mean, with significant attempts. So he's, he can shoot the ball.
I like him as just because I wasn't here last week for the people on video. I like him as a test case for the young guys. It's like, hey, if you can beat him out, you can get on the floor, and I think that's going to be his biggest value is being a 6'10" guy. Those guys have to go up against, even if he's skinny, even if he's not a great defender, whatever. It's length they have to go up against every day.
And he's been through battles. Like think back to what Bielefeld did against Rutgers and like some of the games where we easily could have lost if he didn't step up and like make mature plays. I think Fitzner could do that. Like some games you might not hear from him, and then other games he has 12 points when we really need a boost because he's experienced. He's been through battles. So it's nice having a guy like that.
Yeah, agreed.
So, and you guys did a great job breaking that down last week, Andy.
I promise I'll listen back.
No, you won't.
You won't. You won't. You are a liar.
I've been so busy. I usually listen when I go on like a run or something, and I've been so busy I haven't run this week. So.
Oh man. All right, let's get on with the next segment. Okay. Here we go. Segment 3. Okay, so let's do a weakness on Race first.
Weakness on Race, then underrated guy from this class, and hit some of the others.
Yeah, and then we'll hit some of the
shoehorn Jeremiah April into another segment and move on.
Yeah, that's right.
And Tijon.
That's right. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. Go to assemblycall.com right now to learn how to subscribe to our email newsletter, or just text IU to 66866. If you want to get more out of being an IU basketball fan, then you need to be on our newsletter list. You will get our weekly Six Banner Sunday news roundups, as well as our post-game analysis emails once the season begins. It is all free, and it will make you a smarter IU basketball fan. Go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866. I'm Jared Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. We're talking about the incoming freshman in the class of 2018, not named Romeo Langford. And Ryan, in our last segment, we ended talking about Race Thompson, who obviously is not a member of the class of 2018, but redshirted last year. We talked about his strengths. We didn't talk about his weakness. So what do you think is the biggest weakness for him entering his first year of play?
I don't find a lot of weaknesses or holes in his game, but I would say maybe versatility. Can he step out and hit shots consistently? I think that I've mentioned this before, and I've said that, during the season and before last season, everything, he kind of reminds me of what we saw from Juwan Morgan in high school, where he's maybe primarily going to play in the post in high school. You saw him on sort of the club AAU circuit, stepping out on the floor and shooting more. I think that you're going to see him do both in college and develop into that, but it's about how quickly can he develop into the shooter. Maybe he's been shooting all offseason or all season long and looks great. As you said, we haven't really seen much from him in a long time, but I think that was the one thing when I was watching him, rewatching film of him, I think that he is whether or not he can shoot from the outside consistently.
So now that we've talked about each of these guys' individual strengths and weaknesses, Romeo is the headliner. Big things are expected of Romeo. But as you look at this list of players, who do you think has the best chance of us someday, looking back on them and saying, wow, were they undervalued as a recruit? And it's interesting. It's an interesting conversation, I think, because, a guy like Jerome Hunter, who's a high 4-star level player, what would he have to do for that to, truly be undervalued, be an All-American, be a first team All Big Ten selection, whereas a guy like Jake Forrester, if he makes an All Big Ten team at some point, you're looking at him being a 3-star guy. Is like, wow, he was really undervalued. And we've seen guys from down at Jake Forrester's recruiting level, 137. That's where Victor Oladipo was. That's where Will Sheehy was. That's where Juwan Morgan was a little bit higher than that. But that's where Jordan Hulls was. And a lot of these guys, ended up outperforming that level. And then obviously you've got Robert Phinisee and Damezi Anderson, who are both right around 100. So, Andy, as you look at these guys, which one do you think has the most potential, to really someday be a guy, maybe not on the level of an Oladipo, but a guy like an Oladipo or one of those where you're like, wow, they really outperformed their recruiting ranking?
Yeah, the Hunter one is interesting because I think it kind of gets, I don't know if it's just because he's not from Indiana and the focus has been on, getting Indiana kids and things like that. But I think if you had asked a number of people like where he was ranked compared to the other guys, I think I guess just in terms of general fan excitement about him, I don't know that it necessarily lines up with the fact that he's, ranked higher than everybody in the class but Romeo. So he's kind of an interesting one where I guess if you base it on recruiting rankings, then he's probably not the logical choice there. If you base it on kind of buzz and things like that, then maybe he is somebody who outperforms that. I think.
What's his ceiling, do we think? Like, what do we think Hunter's ceiling legitimately could be?
I don't know.
It's hard to project that kind of stuff without seeing him on the floor in the system, but I would say his ceiling is an All Big Ten player. I think, maybe verging on All-American, but it's going to be hard for him to do that right away with Romeo there, because Romeo is going to take so much attention. But he's a guy who I think stays 2 or 3 years and can wind up being a really, really good draft pick. I mean, he's got that 6'7" wing versatility, which is prized in the NBA. He can play both ways. So I think that's a guy who, look, you're the 40 whatever ranked recruit in the country. We're expecting you to come in and be a leader and be a big time player for us. It's going to depend on what he's surrounded with too, though. I mean, if you get Trace Jackson Davis next year, if you get, other guys who are more skilled and get more time on the floor, then it's going to be, it's really going to depend. But I think an All Big Ten player who's ranked in the top 40, I don't think that's
he's roughly ranked about where Christian Watford was, if I recall correctly. Yeah. I mean, Christian Watford had a great career, but wasn't necessarily like all Big Ten level. Do you think his ceiling for a career is higher than what Christian Watford produced?
I think he's a more complete player. Yeah. Watford, a lot of times these rankings are based too on purely on ceiling. So, you get a guy who's like 6'10", but isn't a great basketball player yet, but he's got so much athleticism, and he's got this and he's got that, and he looks like he's going to be a lottery pick if he just develops, so I mean, honestly, and that's a fair point. And I think that he's just going to be such a good basketball player that, there may not be like a ton of NBA level projection for him as far as size and athleticism and all that stuff go. But I think he's going to be such a good basketball player that he could move himself into that conversation. Certainly. So, but I think he's a guy who's going to stick around for a while and develop steadily.
Yeah, I realized I never actually answered your question, but that was.
Well,
that was
I kind of
good,
interrupted you rudely.
Well, no, that was okay. I don't know that I was on my way to answering it either way, but
you're stealing my thing, Jared, by interrupting.
I guess I would. I guess I'd be inclined to say Phinisee, and maybe not from a makes it to the NBA type of scenario where I think that's, you kind of mentioned the Oladipo, that's the probable extreme outlier as you really look at it. But I think when you look at what Phinisee is, you look at what he's done in high school, it's hard to see him not being successful on some level. And if they can continue to recruit the way that they have been, and you surround a guy like him with other guy with high level talent, it's hard for me to think that you don't look back at the end of his career and he's got some pretty gaudy assist numbers and really is that prototypical college point guard that you have. So I would be inclined to say him, although I think Race Thompson's interesting in that regard. But I guess if I was, pressed from a college career standpoint, it would probably be Phinisee for me.
Yeah, Phinisee's hard for me because I'm already expecting so much from him. I have to
That's
remember.
the thing. It's weird about this because I would think that if you're talking to average IU fans, they would be more excited about Phinisee because he's a point guard and fills a need, and they know so much more about him because he's from Indiana than Hunter. But Hunter is, I'm sorry, I love Phinisee, but Hunter is clearly the better player right now, or at least has the better,
he's the better prospect.
Certainly. Yeah. That's the better way. That's a much better way to put it. I think if you're looking strictly at recruiting ranking, though, I would go with Phinisee as well. I think that he's ranked too low, quite frankly. I think he's very undervalued outside of Indiana. And I think people in the state of Indiana love him, and he's very, highly regarded here. But, I don't know. I think that that's the guy that is the most underrated in this class and will rise to the highest level given his ranking.
And I think for this, when you talk about who we're going to look back on and really, kind of be surprised at how undervalued they are. When you talked about Damezi Anderson and some of his skills and some of the things he needs to work on, if he can work on some of those things, if he can shore up his ball handling and he really works on his conditioning and improves his shot mechanics to where his already good shot gets even more consistent, when you have a guy who has that kind of natural scoring ability and you think about what he could be by the time he's a junior and a senior, he could very well outperform, a ranking in the 90s or the hundreds.
Sure.
Because you're always going to get on the court if you can score points. And you have to think that Archie will be able to motivate him to play defense. So it's going to depend on who else comes in, what the fits are on the roster. But I think Damezi is interesting, given where he is around 100 and given what he's so good at scoring. If he can shore up some of the other things, he's got a pretty high ceiling as a prospect. I think if he can do some of those things, so it'll be interesting to see. And I think what kind of makes this fun. And let me take a quick second and remind you who we are here. This is the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips. But what makes this fun is thinking about all the guys who have outperformed their recruiting rankings. And I mentioned some of them earlier, just, here in the Tom Crean era that we are just out of, obviously OG was the 294th rated recruit, a 3-star guy. He clearly, outperformed that. Victor Oladipo, Juwan Morgan, Jordan Hulls. Here's something funny, guys. I was looking at the 24/7 list and they go back to 2002. So tell me what all 7 of these guys have in common. Okay. T. John Job, Tim Priller, Jeremiah April, Grant Galon, Max Montana, formerly Max Hotzel, Lance Stemler, and OG Anunoby. What do those guys all have in common?
Fantastic names.
They were 61 through 67. Oh, and Guy Marc Michel. They were the last 8 since 2002, the lowest rated recruits incoming to Indiana. And OG Anunoby was in that list, and he turned into a first-round pick.
And was starting for a playoff team. this year as a rookie.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting about that,
And hey, we all said we thought he was the most underrated player in the country when he committed, though. Well, I
Yes.
said it, and you guys agreed.
well, but what's interesting about that,
You're just
obviously,
teeing up your own material for yourself.
Yeah.
You're lobbing
No,
questions to yourself.
Have you met me? Have you met me before, Andy? Come on now.
but it is, it's a reminder that as the national narrative spins out of control with just Victor Oladipo and OG Anunoby, the survivorship bias that will happen now with Tom Crean as being the picker of diamonds in the rough. But this is a reminder of all of the other guys that he took chances on that were well below, that didn't even turn into functional college players. And so OG, obviously the big outlier there, but some of these other guys, and it's one of the reasons why Indiana's roster construction was so poor over time, is because those guys didn't become players.
Lance Stemler was a Kelvin Sampson special. I remember that. He actually, he had an okay time at IU.
Yeah, he was okay,
bad.
and he was
the other guys all pretty much transferred. I mean, Hotzel, Galen, April, and Tijon all transferred, didn't they?
Yeah.
Did Tijon transfer?
No,
he graduated.
No,
he graduated.
Yeah.
So
Guy Mark Michelle never transferred in, so he can't have transferred out. You can't leave somewhere you never.
He got a good education, AD.
So, and you look at Indiana's history with undervalued recruits, and there's a lot there. And we don't have time to get into it now because we're coming up against it, and I want to get to your guys' questions. So what do you guys think about bumping that to a future episode? Because you start going back, there's some really interesting names, and it's kind of fun to remember, holy crap, that guy wasn't even in the top 100. Let's just bump it to maybe next week or the week after. You guys are cool with that.
It's the off season, man. Got to find stuff to talk about.
It is. Okay, so let's do that. So let's hop into our final segment. Let's get to some questions. We will do that next. We've got a lot of great questions from you all that you submitted. One asks us if we could play golf with two former current Hoosier basketball players and two professional golfers. Who would it be and why? It's one of the more interesting questions that we've had. So noodle on that. We'll be back.
Well, I lived on the outskirts of town.
Beautiful. 12:23 for that segment.
How much we got left?
Let's see. We're at 45:25. Let me do my quick math here.
Is that 6:35, right? Yeah.
Yes, that is right. So we have 5:59.
Who would lose who would win in a game of golf? I can tell you who would lose, and that'd be me. I'm horrible at golf.
See, I would say me. Did any of us golf? I guess that's the question.
No, this would be horrendous.
So maybe we should live broadcast us playing golf.
Dude, well, you know what? That's what we should do when we go in the fall is go to the IU course for a day and play like 3 holes and give up. Like
it would be a whole lot of the Bob Knight golf outtakes, but it would be us saying
pretty much
throwing
how much beer am I allowed to bring on the course?
Yeah,
That's
seriously. All of it?
Yeah.
Oh man, that would be fun. That would be fun. Okay, so we'll hit that to end. This question from Joel, I think, is kind of interesting.
Which one is that?
The college basketball trend towards the NBA model of guards being the dominant position because of the 3-point shot.
Yeah, I mean, did you read the SI piece on Villanova after they won the title? About how they hit more threes than any team in college basketball history, and the percentage of shots that were threes was the most of any champion ever.
Mm-hmm. But see, what I think is interesting about that question is he uses the term guards. I don't think the term guard means that much anymore. It's ball handlers who can shoot.
Yeah.
I don't think it's about guards.
No, I mean, and everybody has
Durant's
to be able
not
to
a guard, but he
plays like one. No, I mean, pretty much
that's what I mean.
Everyone has to shoot now. Yeah, you have to be able to shoot.
Yeah, and guys can have different roles on offense than they fill on defense too if they have size. So that kind of makes that interesting. All right, let's do this. Okay. Here we go. You are listening to the Assembly Call. I'm Jared Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, wrapping up another week of talking IU basketball. We got some great questions from you all, so we want to hit as many of those as we can going forward. Let's start with this first one. Andy, I'll go to you with this one from Joe. Everyone's excited about recruiting as I am, but I'm a little worried about guard depth in the future with Romeo likely one and done. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think so much of this becomes a year-to-year proposition. We see how much can change. So I agree with the general point, but again, in the, how many times have we said it kind of works itself out. I think for this year, it'll be fine. And I think you're getting more versatile guys who can, step into those roles if need be. But I think you've got, certainly if a rash of injuries hits, maybe I change my tune on this, but I think for this upcoming year, assuming everything stays as it is, I think you've got a decent group with, Devontae, Rob Phinisee, and Al Durham to go with Romeo. And then you try to figure out who else you can mix and match from there. But I do think it certainly will be a focus of recruiting going forward, because you got to figure that out at some point. But, keep getting some versatile guys in there like they have been. And we talked about, you could end up putting a lineup out there that has the same skills as you'd expect from a guard, but also has some really good size as well. So that's the, flip side of that is you could have some really interesting lineups in that way.
And it's clearly being prioritized in the class of 2019 and future classes as well. So they understand. Ryan, let's talk about Joel's question. He says, is the college basketball trend towards the NBA model of guards being the dominant position because of the three-point shot? Are the metrics affecting how coaches teach the game? And is Archie using those metrics? I think it's quite obvious that the three-point shot grows more and more important every year. Villanova proved that. What I kind of find interesting about Joel's question is the use of the term guards, because I kind of feel like guard is going to start becoming an antiquated term. It's more about, can you handle the ball and can you shoot, no matter what size. So you maybe, have the size of a traditional forward, but you can still shoot threes. And if you can handle the ball a little bit, you can still fulfill that role. It doesn't have to be a guard per se, but the trend is obvious.
Yeah, no, I think that he's right about 3-point shooting. I think that's becoming the trend, and that's going to continue to be the trend until they develop a 4-point shot, and then you're going to have to, it's going to be that, it is so much more efficient to shoot threes if you can make them even at a below 50% clip. It's more efficient than shooting twos at a 60% clip. So I think that you are seeing that move, and I agree with you that it's not just guards, it's everybody, and it's wings. And look, you can't go to the NBA unless you're just a ridiculous defender. You can't go into the NBA and not be able to shoot these days. You can't at all. So I think that guys like you said, it's not guards. It's guys who can handle the ball and shoot. Kevin Durant, not a guard. LeBron James is not a guard, but they can do everything. And the versatility is, I think, what the NBA and what college basketball really values right now, is the versatility to sort of do everything.
All right. This is from Jeremy. If you could play golf with 2 former or current Hoosier basketball players and 2 professional golfers, who would they be and why? And what golf course would you choose, Andy?
I'm not sure I could name 2 professional golfers. No, but let's see. As far as the IU players, I mean, one of them would have to be Calbert Cheney. Just
yes,
for obvious reasons. Anyway, he's listened to the show for a while. Outside of that, I don't know. I mean,
Tom Coverdale seems like he'd be fun to play around.
That was a name that came to mind. Although hearing Holes talk about Elston showing up and playing in flip flops apparently on that podcast this week, I may be somewhat interested to see that. I'll say, I don't know. I'll come back to that. Golfers. I feel like John Daly seems like a good answer.
You'd have a good time.
Yeah. See, that's important.
See, might get arrested, but you'd have fun.
Yeah.
I would want it to be Tiger and Phil, and just let them have their mano a mano thing while we talk basketball with Calbert and anybody else. I think it'd be cool to have Matt Nover on, talk with him about blue chips.
Yeah,
he'd be fun.
Yeah, there'd be a lot. I mean, we could get a whole I mean, I'd probably say Tiger is the other one. I mean, I was at IU in school when he was really, in his heyday. And so just to, kind of harken back to that a little bit, I guess I'll say the Coverdale one was interesting. I think AJ Moye would be a good one, because I think there'd be a lot of good stories from him. So I'll say him as my second IU.
Or George Leach, and he could bring some barbecue. There's so many options here.
I would go with boost from John Daly. You're set.
Yeah. I would go with Oladipo and Cody Zeller, because I think it would be entertaining as heck, and I'm not a golfer. And I would say my 2 golfers would be Tiger and Phil. I don't think there's any other answer than that.
I can't believe you didn't say Killingsworth as one of the IU players.
No. It'd be all about Marco. And let's face it, whenever I do anything, it's all about me. So
well, there we go. And then a follow-up to this was, if the assembly call hosts Oh, and routine guests were to play a game of golf. Who would win? So none of the three of us play golf. So that would be a
I
comedy.
think all of us would
If
lose.
the three of us
It
played,
would
I think
be-
whoever's driving the beer cart is the winner in that.
It would just be Bob Knight outtake after Bob Knight outtake. I'm not sure about Coach or Zach or any of the other folks, but we really should play a round of golf and just let someone follow us around with a camera, and it
or at least like three
might be
holes.
entertaining.
That might
Yeah.
be fun.
It might take us as long to play 3 holes as it would a full round. So, any final thoughts on golf, Ryan, before we wrap up here in about 3 seconds?
I'm terrible. I can usually pick up a sport pretty quickly. Golf, nope.
Mark that. I got to get that drop of you saying I'm terrible. I'm going to get that. All right.
Awful.
That'll do it for us on this week's episode of the Assembly Call. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Thursday nights for the live broadcast of our Assembly Call radio recording. Or you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com/join or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you next week. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers. And cut. 6:43. Very nice. Well done, gentlemen.
A little over, huh?
A little over, but that's okay. That is okay. All right. Awesome to see so many people here tonight.
Yeah, so
Off-season,
let's
man. Romeo's pulling in the casual fans.
let's get let's start looking at is the football schedule out? It is, right? Yeah, it's out. We should try and pick a weekend to do that.
We should.
Yeah,
Sometime
see-
in October, I guess.
Yeah, that would be the
Around
best
Hoosier
time.
Hysteria.
Yeah.
All right.
So-
We're thinking about getting ready to start planning. We don't want to guarantee it or write it in pen yet, but we're getting ready to start planning a fall trip up. Maybe do a live broadcast before a football game, do some tailgating, and then get everybody hyped for Hoosier Hysteria.
Yes,
So
the
we
great
got to
Kent,
work out some details.
the great Kent Sterling will likely be joining us, and we can
Yes.
maybe actually do a 2-hour show, considering interviews, and it'll be live. I think that'd be good.
That would go by, that would go by fast.
Yeah, really fast, especially if we were just doing guests. Because I mean, and it's not, we don't do guests that often, so
Yeah.
it'd be fun to get them all in one show.
Working title is better than Dockage Game Day. We still have to- we might have to
I think it'd be
of-
great if we could, Kent knows how to do that, but if we could set up outside, it depends. I mean, weather permitting, that'd be awesome. Just like
That
on
would
the
be awesome.
somewhere in the parking lot, and yeah, that'd be very cool. We could
That would be awesome.
we let Coach do his assembly call tailgate in the area.
Oh yeah.
and
Oh yes. Oh yes. He
be
is a
passing us-
primetime tailgater.
be passing us beers while we're doing it. Professional, really professional.
It's been a while since we've had beers during the show. That was a staple back in the early days of these.
Not for me. I've never done it. I have not once had
Oh,
a beer
man.
during the show. The only
Oh,
time
man.
I've been on the show when I've been
What a
drinking is prude. Did you just call me a prude?
Got you rude.
That's hilarious. No, the only time I've been drinking when I've been on the air was the Syracuse game, because I had to go to a bar to watch it. Yeah, that was the only time I've ever been drinking on the show. But I'm a professional journalist, guys. So as I show weekly on here.
Hey, let me ask you a question real quick.
Okay.
So, did you see my tweets from last week about those 2 articles in The Athletic where they said that Romeo's pastor said that that Romeo was kind of like Abraham Lincoln, but he didn't say that?
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah.
And then they wrote in the article that he said that. So, so I got the confirmation from the pastor that he didn't say it, which is what I thought in the first place. I wrote that piece on Assembly Call. I even emailed The Athletic just to say, like, hey, these are presented as fact, but it's actually not true. I feel like you should at least say, if you don't want to change it, at least say it's in dispute, since the article is still up there live. I never heard back, and the lines are still there. None of them were changed. And
Did you at the writers?
yeah, I at
That's
the
what-
writers when it happened, everything. So, I mean, maybe they don't know, but I have to think that they would, or certainly I let The Athletic know.
I will say
So-
this about what happened. The first time I heard the speech, I thought that's what he was saying. And then I rewatched it after what you had talked to him about. And I was like, okay, yeah, it's clear what's going on there. He just stumbled over his words and he's saying,
and I think that's reasonable to mishear it at first.
Yes.
Like I totally, and even, I still think you should probably double check it and verify before it goes in the article. But I could even see
honestly, if I had re-listened to it without the pastor saying what he said to you, I wouldn't have heard it.
Okay,
because so if they didn't know, if they're not aware that the pastor told you, no, that's not what I was trying to say. I stumbled over my words. And even if they listened back, I still think they'd come to the same conclusion because it was very confusing.
I really don't think it was that confusing in the context of the sentence. Either way, okay, even with that said, even if you give them that leeway, then if it's brought to your attention that even the pastor disputed it, and you've been told this multiple times, that's not unreasonable to, because I canceled my subscription just because it's weird now for me to read their articles and think, here's this fact that's presented as fact, and I know that it's not, and it was even pointed out to them, and they don't even have the integrity, which to me is integrity, to go back and change it or acknowledge that even the person who said it is disputing it. I can't figure out if I'm making too big of a deal of it in my own mind, but I don't.
I think to some degree. So here's the thing: is that I know as a journalist, being in the content business, sometimes when you put something like that up, you're on to the next thing. You're not like, so even if it's brought to their attention a week later or 5 days later, they'll probably be like, yeah, well, nobody's going to read it now anyway because it's in the past. And I'm not saying that's right.
Okay.
I'm just saying that's sometimes in the content business, you're kind of like, yeah, well, I screwed up. Okay. And you won't go out of your way to like change it and then write a retraction and then whatever, because it's like, well, then I misheard it. It's not like I was intentionally misrepresenting facts. I misheard it, whatever. It's understandable if you listen to this, whatever. I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying I know some people have that attitude that like, well, this week, after that day, nobody's going to read about it, Romeo Langford and his pastor, when it's something like that. Now, look, if they were writing a 5,000 word piece on Romeo Langford, his future as an NBA player, all this other stuff, and on top of that included a fact about a guy, I think they'd be more likely to change it because that's something that is going to get read and reread and reread and reread all summer. Whereas this was just kind of like a small thing about.
I think that's weak.
I completely agree with you. I
get that. That's probably the mindset. I just think that's
No,
I'm mortified. Cause even in that article, I had an error. I said that we beat Duke to advance to the Sweet 16. It was the Elite Eight. And Mike DeCourcy pointed it out to me. And I was mortified just at that error. So it was the first thing I would do to go back and change it. And I guess I don't understand.
No, I'm with you. I always change everything.
The Athletic. I would just think if you have something that is wrong or is disputed, why wouldn't you go back and change that? That would irk me until I changed it.
Couple things. It's possible that nobody saw your email. With a big company like that, because they get so many and it just gets buried.
Yeah, but I'm a subscriber. So if that's the case, then I'm glad I canceled. If they think that what a subscriber is telling them.
Again, I'm not defending them. I'm just explaining certain things. And I'm not defending them not changing it. And I'm not defending them leaving it up, even if they said, oh, well, there's an error, but who cares? I don't defend that. That's not the way I operate. I just know that in the content business, sometimes if it's a few days old, people are just sort of like, well, who cares? Nobody's reading it anyway, So, but no, every time there's an error for me, not only do I change it, but I mark it. And look, people forgive you making an error. Like if you're mortified about saying, like if you were mortified about we advanced to the Sweet 16, go in and change it and just mark it. Be like, I screwed up. Like people understand that it's not that big a deal. You write things fast, stuff happens, especially for a guy like you. You don't have a full-time editor working with, like to oversee everything. If you work at a newspaper and you make an error like that, it's a big deal because there's like 5 layers it goes through to get there. Yeah. On Big Lead, a lot of times we're kind of left to our own devices. And I mean, I have typos in articles, I shouldn't, but when you read back over it, you get into the mindset of when you were typing it and you're not really actually reading what you're saying. And
no, you can't hold journalists to the standard of no errors,
of never make a mistake.
And even you might make a mistake with a fact. Like that's totally understandable. Like that's going to happen. It's just, what do you do when it's pointed out? And of
course you should always correct it. But what I would say about the Athletic is, I would bet that somebody missed the email, because if they didn't, did you? I'm assuming you added them on Twitter. You added them. You added both the writers. Like, I mean, and that's a miss. But again, sometimes these guys, if they don't follow you back, sometimes you miss it in your timeline. I mean, there's been one.
I even went back and forth with one of them. So I mean, I know that he
and
knows.
You told him it was an error.
Yeah, I mean, I even showed him the tweets from.
Okay. Well, then that's inexcusable to me. Then it's inexcusable. But
that's how I view it too. So I just wanted to be sure that I wasn't.
Yeah, no, and again, I wouldn't operate like that. I'm just explaining the minds, like, to those who are watching. I would never operate like that, but I'm explaining to some people the mindset behind, well, it's a week later, who cares? Like, that does exist. Like, I've got 50 things to do. This is last on my list of things I need to do. But I agree with you, and that's not the way I do it. It's not the way I operate. And we do all make mistakes.
Including you.
I do from time to time, shockingly. I know. I'm disappointing you guys with that note.
By the way, I was thinking about bringing up the Syracuse 2003 comparisons.
Don't ever, please.
I didn't want this to turn into a Barkley Shaquille O'Neal shouting.
Google me, Jared. Google me. I will say that this year now, and you guys are the only ones who will get it. Google me. You'll get lots of Ryan Phillippe stuff.
Yeah, you will.
You will. That's
Google me.
I'm way more handsome on Google than I am in person.
All right. Do we have anything else left to discuss here tonight?
I'm hungry. That's what we need to discuss. I'm out of here soon.
All right. Fair enough.
Nice.
I'm starving. I've stuck around and hung out for a little assembly call after dark for you, but I'm starving. and the Predators are about to lose to the Jets in hockey, which is not good. All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I could just leave. You could just play that.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Thanks for being here, everybody, tonight. We will. Oh, hey, but not next week. We got to figure out who's hosting 2 weeks from now, because I'm going to be in San Diego.
I'm going to be drinking with you, so yeah.
Oh boy, I should be able to do it.
Okay. Yeah, let me know. We got to figure that out.
Oh, you know what would be a good perspective to get? Get like Michael on and see if there's any buzz around campus about Romeo, even if it's just for a segment.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. We talked about having him on, but we haven't done it yet. Yeah, we do need to get Michael on. So I told him we'd get him on in a episode coming up.
Sure.
By the way, you know what's going to be funny about that trip to San Diego is my daughter gets up at 6:00 in the morning and goes to bed at like 6:30. So she's going to be getting up at like 4 a.m. and getting ready for bed by like 4:30. So it's not going to be a whole lot of.
You can't just like leave her.
No, you're a parent. You can't just leave her there.
That's a really astute observation, Ryan. Good job.
Yeah. I mean, look, it was more like a question. You can't just leave her.
No, it doesn't really work like that.
No, do what we did with my niece when she was in Italy and completely screwed up. Just like trick her into thinking it's like 7:00 when it's like 10:30.
No.
High clocks.
Yeah. It'll be fun though. All right, gents.
Heather can let you go out, get smashed with your co-host.
Yeah.
One night.
Yeah.
Then she can go out with me the next night, so you can just stay home. You guys can alternate.
All right.
What days are you going to be? What days of the week are you going to be here?
Wednesday through Sunday.
Morning or night on Wednesday? Do you get in?
Early afternoon.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. We'll figure all that out.
Yep. Sounds good, man.
All right, guys. Have a good night. You all
later, guys.
Have a good evening. Thanks for being here. We'll talk to you next Thursday.
All right. See you.
See y'all.
See you.